Bitcoin's one of those things. It's complex enough that you all like, no matter how long you've researched it, you always are still learning about it. But the more I learn about it, the more bullish I get. Um, and at the same time, I kind of view it as the only realistic method to change some of our monetary aspect. That we're kind of stuck in this local maximum of money, where transaction speeds are very fast, but settlement speeds of anything scarce like gold have been very slow. And so we've kind of had a century and a half of necessary abstraction, and that's easy to centralize and control and leverage. Um, and Bitcoin is the first and really only credible way to break out of that. So while I'm never 100% sure on any asset, there's all sorts of challenges and frictions that can happen. But if it's not Bitcoin, I don't really know what else it would be.
Lyn Alden, a renowned macro analyst and investment strategist, has expressed her growing optimism for Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency by market capitalization. Alden is a prominent figure in the Bitcoin community and has consistently shown bullish sentiment towards the cryptocurrency since 2020. Surprisingly, she now claims her bullishness has intensified, a perspective that might seem unlikely given her years of research and advocacy for Bitcoin's qualities. Alden's reinforced confidence in Bitcoin can be attributed to her recent book, Broken Money, a thought-provoking work that examines the history of money through a technological lens. In the book, Alden delves into the deficiencies of the current fiat-based global financial system, emphasizing its negative impact on billions of people worldwide while disproportionately enriching the top 1%. She discusses how advancements in technology and abundant energy have improved various aspects of our lives but have notably left the outdated monetary system behind. According to Alden, the time has come for a permanent shift from a debt-based, inflationary monetary system to one that supports scarcity, deflation, decentralization, and streamlined digital transactions. In a conversation with Natalie Brunell, Alden stresses the inevitability of Bitcoin as the only suitable replacement for the current monetary system. Her extensive research on the history of money, from ancient forms like shells and gold to modern central banks, has led her to this conclusion. Alden believes it's only a matter of time before the world recognizes the fragility of our financial situation and turns to Bitcoin as the solution. We present clips from this enlightening conversation with one of the industry's most brilliant minds.
Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to drop your comment and observations in the comment section below. Thanks and enjoy the video.
Sure. So I view basically that, once the telegraph was invented, that allowed for rapid transmission of data. But transactions require a lot less data than settlements. So it's easy to, with something as simple as Morse code, you can do a transaction with someone. Whereas, digital settlement or fast global settlement requires something like Bitcoin, which, if you look at what Bitcoin requires, it requires much more complex math, much more complex processors, much more complex telecommunication systems. I mean, the internet, which didn't exist back then, but then not even just the internet, you need relatively high bandwidth ways of transmitting data to have the kind of the throughput we have today with Bitcoin. And then you need certain encryption methods that, the latest encryption method that Bitcoin uses wasn't invented or released until like 2001, right? So it's kind of like Bitcoin came almost as quickly as it could have, based on the bandwidth, the processing, the encryption methods that all kind of came together. So I would argue that it's inevitable that something like the telegraph would come way before Bitcoin. And because that happens, that creates this window, which in our case was a century and a half. Maybe if there's alien races, maybe they had a shorter window, maybe they have a longer window, but that window is going to exist. And in that window, it greatly amplifies the power of those that run money, right? Because now you necessitate abstraction. If you can transfer value, if you can make transactions very quickly, but you can't settle gold very quickly, then those who are keeping the ledgers and running things are basically have a monopoly status now. And a government, has trouble enforcing rules on all of its individuals, but it can easily enforce rules on a handful of banks. Basically, it's 1,000-fold less entities to go after. You can say all banks have to do this rule, and so governments are able to centralize their banking systems and basically have a monopoly. And that's how we end up in this world of 160 different fiat currencies, which are all these little bubbles. And then outside of the top 10 currencies or so, currencies not really accepted anywhere else. So for example, Thai baht, Egyptian pounds, even currencies of wealthy countries like Norway. If I go around in New Jersey trying to spend Norway physical currency, it's actually going to be quite challenging to get that off my hands. The saleability is extremely low, outside of its own country and maybe a couple neighboring countries. Um, and so we've been in this environment where technology, the order that it had to happen in,
Mhm.
and for quite a while has put us in this kind of local maximum. And the invention of Bitcoin is the first credible way to end that era. We've now, after another century and a half from the telegraph, we now have digital settlement. So we have a ledger that is decentralized rather than centralized, and you can send bearer asset final settlement around. So it's not based on debt, it's not based on credit, it's not based on an IOU. It's actually just finally settled through the software
Mhm.
logic and control. And that is, it was inevitable that Bitcoin would happen. Now the question is it inevitable that Bitcoin wins, right? I can picture a world where, say, the person who figured out Bitcoin was like a scammer, right? Imagine if someone was as smart as Satoshi, but they gave themselves a pre-mine or something,
Right.
or spent their coins, or just had a terrible
Mhm.
personality, never disappeared, and revealed who they were. And I can imagine a world where the second currency instead kind of overtakes the first one, right? If the
Mhm.
first one was kind of launched poorly. But I think in some way, it's this is now a technology that exists. We're fortunate that Bitcoin was the first one rather than kind of a scammy one being first. That allowed the network effect to accumulate on a good system without having to be disrupted, hopefully. And so we have this. This is like the first real shot to get out of the century and a half window we've been in. And so I think it's important to keep analyzing risks, things that could prevent that. And I think it's important for people to do what they can to support that system.
Mhm.
I think it's important for companies to build on it. I think it's important for people to, um, talk about it. They can let their politicians know that they're in favor of it. There's all sorts of little things that people can do around the margins that
Mhm.
give Bitcoin the breathing room it needs to get out of its, like, child state and into, the more large and liquid and secure it gets, the better shot it has that this is actually going to continue taking off.
During the interview, Alden elucidates that the ease brought into our daily lives by basic technological advancements we now take for granted, such as running water and refrigeration, was embraced readily by people. According to the distinguished macro analyst, Bitcoin is poised to join the ranks of these indispensable technologies that become an integral part of our everyday routines. Alden further characterizes Bitcoin as the first credible solution for ensuring widespread usability and swift settlements, a belief she holds strongly, expecting the entire world to recognize this before the decade's end. However, she emphasizes that, to achieve this potential, Bitcoin investors must actively support further development and growth. Alden underscores that Bitcoin's realization as a pervasive technology won't occur while everyone remains preoccupied with criticizing the Federal Reserve and the existing financial system. When Bitcoin reaches its full potential, Alden is confident it will be as universally embraced as running water and refrigeration.
When you see a lot of smart people into crypto, a lot of it is because they themselves can benefit from it. They're the ones that are kind of issuing tokens and then basically being able to sell them before they've actually built a product. So one of the big challenges in the crypto space is that if you look at traditional venture capital, accredited investors or founders of companies themselves are locking up their equity for many years in most cases, and their only realistic way to get out from that situation is either the company is successful enough to go public, and they can begin selling shares, or the company gets acquired by another business. So basically, a bunch of professional analysts are assessing this business and decide to acquire it and bring it in part of their business. And so the outcome of that investment is largely tied to the success of the company that they built. Whereas in crypto, you've removed the gatekeeper, but that the incentive there is that you can sell the tokens to the public before you've actually proven the long-term viability of the project. So the founders can get rich either way, whether or not the project's successful. So there are plenty of smart people that say, well, I want to get a piece of that, right? Because
Mm.
intelligence doesn't always come with ethics, or they'll make arguments. Well, I sold something that was the market price, and I walked away rich even though I didn't build anything, right? And so I think that's the biggest risk. I think from the libertarian perspective, you can argue it's good that the gatekeepers are down, that people can this is another type of market behavior that people can navigate. But I
Mm.
think that what we have to do as consumers is build up that experience that, because those gatekeepers are down, the long tail of almost everything is going to be trash, right? And that there's way more ways for VCs and founders and just to create things that keep dumping them out there. And I
Yeah.
think there has to be a number of cycles of people learning to defend against that. So I can see why these founders are interested in it. I think, and from a consumer perspective, there's always kind of the desire to get rich, that they're going to be
Yeah.
the one that gets the, buys the next big thing and then gets out towards the top.
Yeah.
And, obviously for every one person that does that, there are like 99 that don't do that. The other thing I think I'd point out is that it's been, almost 15 years since Bitcoin was released, about 15 years since it was proposed. And the use case for things that are not money in the broad crypto space are almost nothing, right? So there's Bitcoin, there's stable coins. That's been the most effective kind of crypto technology outside of Bitcoin in terms of market cap, volumes, actually solving a problem for people in the real world. It's basically another way for an Argentinian to get dollars, for example. Um, Outside of those monetary use cases, most everything else kind of comes in waves and then dies down, and then comes in another wave and dies down, and comes in another wave and dies down. And then we look at the whole space and say, what has created more value? All of that, or like one company like Kickstarter, for example, that allows kind of people to get capital and release a product and things like that, right? So I would argue that the fact that very little utility is actually emerging from the space that's not money is increasing evidence that it's not what a lot of the crypto proponents would
Mm.
argue that it is. I still think in general the stablecoin model of applying that to other types of assets. So if an Argentinian can own dollar, why can't they also own a share of Apple stock if they want to, right? So maybe tokenizing actually real world businesses could make sense. But again, the even if that's the case, the market cap of that idea, basically the tech rails that enable that, are limited, right? If you
Mhm.
look at the total value of all stock exchanges today, for example, I mean it's worth tens and hundreds of billions of dollars, but it's not worth like $10 trillion.
Mhm.
You're just the middleman, and so tech providers or exchange providers, things like that, there might be certain markets for that type of thing to make certain types of assets more divisible or more globally accepted.
Yeah.
But I think that that's just a much smaller idea than investing in a new base layer of money.
In some of her recent tweets, Alden delves into the fourth turning, a theory concerning the upheaval of an era in response to a perceived threat to a nation's survival, resulting in the destruction and subsequent rebuilding of institutional life. She expounds on the notion that there's an inherent entropy within existing orders, wherein institutions and systems become too antiquated, unjust, and corrupt to fulfill their original purposes. This gradual rejection and criticism of these systems, similar to the ongoing sentiment in the United States where governmental entities like Congress and the FDA receive notably low approval ratings, signifies a period of intense crisis. According to Alden, we are now entering an era that necessitates the complete transformation and reconstruction of the global monetary system. She cautions that there will likely be a recapitalization of the foundational monetary layer, potentially involving the introduction of central bank digital currencies. Money itself will undergo a profound transformation, and while the crisis may not be fully realized yet, Alden warns that the tide is shifting rapidly, and the events of the next 5 to 10 years will be pivotal in shaping our future. She underscores the importance of avoiding the replacement of a flawed, centralized, and dysfunctional system with an even more corrupted and nightmarish alternative. Alden invites comments and observations on her interview, welcoming thoughts from readers on her perspective. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.